Hello, I'm Tony Kuzmato with GC America, and here we have with us today is Dan Boskocevic, Laboratory Product Manager, and we're going to ask him a few frequently asked questions that have been coming to our website, and we would like our customers and labs to be aware and have some extra knowledge. So Dan, I received a call from John at a lab, and he wanted to know if you can please explain what is the difference between a diluting liquid and the refreshing liquid that is included in the Lustre paste kit.
Well, Tony, the diluting liquid is a liquid that we use to actually dilute the material, okay? So if you need to thin out or dilute the material on the tray or on the pallet, you can do that. Be careful not to dilute it too much, though, because it does become runny and it makes the color basically puddle and pool. The refreshing liquid is really designed to be able to use as a drip method into the bottles. If the bottle dries out by any chance, you could add some refreshing liquid to basically bring life back to the material.
Great, I'm sure labs will appreciate that. What other types of tips can you give for Lustre paste?
Lustre paste is a really unique material. One of the benefits to it, it's not a stain or a glaze. It's actually a ceramic. And the nice thing about it is the material could be used for multiple purposes, not only for actually staining the restorations, but also, for example, if a dentist had Lustre paste in their operatory, okay, and they needed to be able to, if they had to do a shade change on the spot, they can literally take a shade and change that shade, and if they just had a little porcelain oven, there's no need for a vacuum or a pump, and they can be able to change shades. They can so they don't have to wait for the case to go back to the lab and have to come back, and they can do it right on the spot. Another way to use this material is if, for example, if you had a slightly open contact, if you were to take some neutral, thicker without diluting it, and you were to take it on the brush and put it right on the contact, you can actually just beef up that contact enough, run it on its normal cycle, and when it comes out, you can just rubber wheel that contact into place. So there's a lot of multiple reasons to use Lustre paste. So another way to use Lustre paste is actually for multiple reasons. You could take a bridge like this, and as you see, you could take that bridge and add color to this bridge, add brightness, add gray value, and as a matter of fact, this 3-unit bridge is the same shade. And you can see just by using the Lustre paste, we're able to have 3 different effects in value, and lightness, and in chroma. So it's an amazing material to be used all around for all purposes.
A lab has noticed spotting or cracking in the Lustre paste in addition to the orange peel effect. Can you please clarify that?
Sure. The big thing to remember with Lustre paste is they can't come in contact with water. If you have this issue, make sure that there's no water on the residual water in the brush. This could also cause a problem in the Lustre paste when firing. That being said, it's also important to know that Lustre paste should not be used with a vacuum pump. It should be the cycle should go without any kind of vacuum whatsoever. Another tip is to clean your brushes with diluting liquid. Okay, you don't want to clean your brushes with water. You don't want water to contact this material because it will cause pitting and some micro bubbles in the material.
What happens after Lustre paste is fired and the results are not achieved?
It comes to 2 things really. It's either your temperature and your holding time, or you need to add a little bit thicker layer of the Lustre paste or the neutral. Okay, I've actually had that question quite a few times myself, and some of the technicians out there have asked, why do I have to do multiple firings? And the reason why is because usually you're putting it on way too thin. Okay, if you're not getting the glaze you want, that could be one of the problems. Also, your temperature, you might have to raise your temperature a bit.
Can Lustre paste be applied a second time?
Absolutely. There's a couple options. You can either sandblast the crown and reapply it completely, or if you need to add more chroma, or if you need to darken a shade, you can do that by adding A, B, C, or D, the value shades, and just apply a little bit thicker layer, or apply a little bit more to the surface of the crown, and you could just refire it. The important thing to remember, though, is that the more you add on, the less texture, you're going to lose more texture. Okay, so that's also something you should keep in mind.
Thank you. Can luster paste be applied as an internal stain?
Yeah, absolutely. You can. The one thing I would advise against is using the neutral internally, because that neutral is almost like a glaze, and what would happen, you could get a delamination there. But the colors, no problem. You can use the colors internally before you add any additional layer of ceramic. Today we'll be doing a upper first molar. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a luster paste presentation. It's going to be a slightly different technique than what Mr. Hoshi was showing you previously, but this is a technique that works for me. So it goes to show that luster paste could be applied in many different types of applications depending on your style, depending on your comfort level, and so forth. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I dispense the neutral onto my mixing palette. Once I'm done with that, I'll take a little of the diluting liquid and get the desired creamy consistency that I'm looking for. Me personally, I like the consistency to be kind of milky. Okay, then once that's done, I'll take the neutral luster paste on my brush, and a little bit bigger brush because I'm going to coat the entire restoration first. Okay, so I'm going to go apply the neutral first, and I'm going to cover the entire surface of the crown with neutral. So basically all this is just a complete coat of the neutral on the entire restoration. Okay, the one thing to be careful of when you're applying the neutral is that you don't want to apply too much of it in your pits, fissures, central fossa, because you want to try and keep some of that anatomy. Also, if you apply the neutral too thick, what ends up happening is you could lose a lot of the contours and a lot of the detail that you put on the surface of the restoration. So here what I'll do is I'll just kind of do a little bit of a light wash here on the ridges and the cusp tips. This way we keep all the anatomy in there. And if you start to see any puddling, you can easily just take your brush, dry it off a little bit, and just dab that out of the pits. And that's pretty much it as far as the neutral application goes. The next thing we're going to do is we take our luster paste A, B, C, or D, depending on the shade of the crown. The thicker you apply this, or the more you apply these materials, the more you can actually change the shade. So if you're trying to keep an A2, for example, and all you want to do with an A2 or an A3 is just add a little bit of accentuation at the gingival and just basically accentuate the crown, you don't want to add too much of these colors. If you're trying to actually change a shade or take it from an A3 to an A3/5 or A4 even, you could do that by adding more of these A, B, C, or D colors. All right, so we take a little bit of the A in this situation, and all I'm going to do is just kind of accentuate. So I'm just going to go around the gingival area a little bit and give some nice chroma and some nice color there at the margin. But nothing too dramatic, because again, we don't want to change the shade necessarily. All we want to do is just really give it a nice warm effect there at the margin and make it look more natural. So we go around the whole margin with the A. And a lot of times if you get any kind of like puddling or sticking, it's just a matter of working the brush. Feathering, tapping, working the brush, and also tapping. Tapping smooths and settles everything so there's no puddles or pooling. Another thing you can even do This works the same whether you're doing a milled restoration, if you're using CEREC, E4D, using a milled restoration, PFM. It's the same technique in reality, okay? So whether you're doing this at the lab or you have a dental assistant doing it or the dentist himself, something that's very simple and easy to do. Another thing is if you want to add depth, for example, and you want to take a little bit of that A and add some warmth into the occlusal, you can actually do that as well. And this is really just, you could just do this to add some nice depth and warmth. And again, if it puddles, you can wipe your brush, take it dry, and just dab it out. Okay, so we just want very, very subtleness here. Even here at the cusp of cerebellum, you can add a little bit in there. Again, we're looking at just very nice subtleties here. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to actually take some of these luster paste materials and some of the colors to add some depth and some height to the cusp tips by adding some of these materials to the occlusal surface of the molar. Okay, one of the next things we can do is we could take a little bit of the gray L3 or L4 and you get a nice enamel effect if you needed to add some to give you some sense of translucency. You can also do that as well. So there's certain parts of the occlusal that I might want to give a nice effect of translucency to. Maybe here at the mesial and distal. Sometimes it puddles. All you got to do is just brush it right out. Okay? It's the same thing on the mesial. Wanted to add some blues or some grays, you could do that. In this case, we're using gray. And again, it's very subtle. Maybe we'll put a little bit of blue here on the cusp tips. And if you get too much on there, it's very easy just to wipe it off and feather it. Just very subtle effects. You can start to see translucency there. So you're starting to get dimension out of a monolithic type restoration. And the next thing we can do, if you want the color to stay and you don't want it to puddle, another option, especially when you're doing such small amounts, like right now I'm going to add some snow caps to the ridges. So right now I'm going to add just a little snow capping effect to the ridges, to the cusp tips. Okay, and this just gives you a really, it just makes the occlusal pop really nice. And again, I wouldn't use any diluting liquid in this situation. I would just apply it straight to the occlusal part of the crown. You start to already see that difference, don't you? Also, this white is nice if you want to add a halo effect, snow capping of the cusp tips, decalcification. So again, just some nice occlusal effects. Then we can tap it for everything to settle a little bit. Okay. And the last thing we're going to do is take a very fine tip brush, take some of the stains from the In Vivo and Suto stain kit from the initial line, and we can add that and incorporate some of those stains into the luster paste because they're very intense. So if you wanted to do some occlusal pitting in the central fossa, you could do that. You could take either a brush or a fine needle point and just add a little bit of the So if you just want some very subtle occlusal staining, you can see we just put on very little bit. Okay, just enough to give it some character. Okay, so we want to keep it really nice and just subtle. Okay, as you see, it's done, ready to be fired. So now it's ready to go into the oven. So now this crown is pretty much done. I mean, we could play with it longer if we needed to add more characterization, if you needed to add darker characterization, change the shade, add craze lines or crack lines, anything you really need to do. But all we wanted to do here was just do some minor accentuation. Okay, so now the crown came out of the oven, and as you can see, it has a very nice glaze to it. Not anything extreme, just very minor characterization. It's a very nice looking crown.